Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 312, and we're going to talk about a couple of things, but Trump's tariff strategy and the fact that today is Frederick Douglass's birthday. So, Frederick Douglass Day. I just made that up. I don't think it actually exists, but now it does. But anyway, a couple of things first. Uh, I was listening to the Jimmy Dore show, and he has an episode called "Trump Outplayed the Deep State by Turning an Obama Program into DOGE." A lot of people in Congress are trying to basically say that everything that Trump is doing is unconstitutional, et cetera, and trying to basically stonewall and delay all of the transparency that DOGE is bringing to the country. And basically, he says that DOGE is not a new agency, but rather it is an Obama agency retasked and renamed into DOGE. So, in other words, the USDS, the United States Digital Service, was created to fix Obamacare. And this was back in 2014, because it was such a horrible rollout. I think I might have even mentioned that not too long ago. And so basically, USDS was created to fix that problem. And it was given a certain amount of money for a budget. It was given rights to all these other agencies to be able to integrate it, I guess, into all of these other agencies. And so it is an organization or bureaucracy that was created by Obama that, and so it was just sitting there all this time, fully funded, probably unstaffed, right? Just waiting dormant, I guess. I don't know how that actually works in detail, but it's been there. So you can't defund it. You can't say what they're doing is unconstitutional because, well, Obama did it, right? So I thought that was really interesting. I thought I'd share that with you. Also, another video that I saw was it's called Unpacking the Document That Spells Out Trump's Tariff Strategy. Okay, it's kind of long. I didn't put it in my title, but basically, I don't know if it's an actual thing, but they mentioned something called the optimal tariff theory. Okay, and so it's Bob Murphy talking with someone else. Let's see if I have it here. Josh Hendrickson. He was an economics professor at Ole Miss, and yeah, it's heavy on the economics, and so usually with a video like that, I watch it twice or three times, if just to try to get my head around it. But I'm so short of time these days, even though I do speed up the playback. But I thought that it would be interesting to share with you in case you were interested. But basically, it's saying that there is a sweet spot of tariffs, primarily because the United States has the reserve currency. And so there is a argument. And the guy that Donald Trump picked to carry out his tariff strategy actually wrote a paper. He was a Harvard PhD in economics, and he basically was explaining and seeing how it could actually work. So all of this with the things that I said yesterday, which is Trump getting out of or saying that U.S. troops will not be in Ukraine, Ukraine will not join NATO, and that he's going to start peace talks with Putin, and at the same time also start trilateral military budget drawdown with Russia and China, by 50%. All of this together, you can kind of begin to see Trump's larger plan, or at least more of his plan. I also saw that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of England, call up Zelensky and say, "Hey, you are guaranteed you're coming into NATO." which, all the United States has to do is pull out of NATO and then everything collapses, right? And so that's probably something which is on the docket, right? Something that Trump is eventually going to get around to do. But there is an order, there is a process, I think, that he is going through, especially since Tulsi Gabbard just got confirmed the other day. And so his intelligence reports that he gets, his briefings in the morning, will probably be better. Like it'll have better information in it, which so then he can then justify pulling out of NATO and pushing even harder for peace. But he'll have hard information to do that, a foundation to do that. He did say that he was going to be the most libertarian president, or he's going to be a libertarian president, and everyone kind of laughed when he said that. But I mean, you kind of gotta acknowledge that he already has done much, much more than a libertarian president, right, who won an election. He's already done more than Chase Oliver perhaps would have been able to do because the deep state would have been against him. He wouldn't know how to navigate. He wouldn't have all of the allies that you need that Trump is surrounding himself with to carry out all of the things that are being done now. Like, in other words, I think that Trump's experience has allowed him to predict and even, have a contingency plan to, work around all of the stonewalling that Congress is trying to put up. And also, he did say that, he wanted peace not only in the Ukraine, but in the Middle East. He said that. And so perhaps the things that he says, which are so like shocking, perhaps, like we're going to own Gaza, was just simply part of the deal. I heard today that Egypt said, in response to what Trump said, that they would finance rebuilding Gaza. And so you got to ask yourself, was it, in spite of the fact that he probably just said it, to get people off their butts and do something. The fact that Egypt is going to rebuild Gaza, I mean, I don't think that Trump would say, oh, no, no, we'll do it, especially when he's trying to cut government expenditures left and right. I don't think that he's cutting all of that so he can rebuild Gaza. I just don't, it just doesn't seem that way. And if he wants the military budget to be cut by 50%, I don't think that war with Iran or helping Israel continue their war, I don't think that that is what Trump desires. That, and what I was suspecting before, that he's sort of playing this game where he's just trying to string them along, but make it so obvious that to everyone who wants Israel to, wage perpetual war, that it's just not possible. So that's kind of my overview update, things that I heard in what little time I had to catch up on the news after school. But here we are, February 14th, 2025, which typically most people will say is Valentine's Day, but from now on, I'm going to say it's Frederick Douglass Day. All right. And he was born as he kind of guesstimates it, right? So February 14th, 1818, that's what he adopted as his birthday. He was born a slave, right? Uh, and he was, separated from his parents. He was sort of raised by his grandmother. And I read a totally different story of his childhood. Uh, so I guess, and I'm not an expert, so maybe there was more to the story. I don't know. But what I just read was that when he finally got a person to own him, that person taught him how to read. But then her husband said, "Oh, you can't teach slaves how to read because knowledge and slavery are incompatible." And he remembered that. And so he came up with a saying which continually motivated him and kept him on point, which is knowledge is the pathway from slavery to freedom, right? I'll repeat that. Knowledge is the pathway from slavery to freedom. And, I love it, of course. And it fits in with everything else that I pretty much say. And it is very, oriented towards freedom, obviously, because freedom is the goal. And so he was taught to read, but he was forbidden to uh, continue receiving instruction. Uh, then he was hired out to someone. I heard he was hired out to repair ships, but he was hired out and maybe it was to repair ships, I don't know. But self-hire is something that I talked about, quasi-free slaves. I talked about before in a previous episode. I forget. I didn't look it up, but I did. And slavery is just so expensive that what you do is whenever you can, you hire out your slaves. And so the slaves are paid, but a significant or a part of what they are paid goes to their master. And so therefore the master can recoup his losses, as it were, and sort of reduce the pain that you incur, the financial pain that you incur when you have slaves, right? Because they're not working all the time for you. And so when he was hired out, the person who hired him, was renting him, shall we say, taught him how to read more. But then he got too uppity and he was sent to a slave breaker who beat him pretty regularly until he was 16, where he fought back in such a way that he wouldn't be beaten again. All right, so he learned how to read and eventually he ran away. And eventually, after that, he bought his freedom formally, right? So, what I want to do today, in the anniversary of his birthday, is read some portions of a speech he gave in 1862, January 1862. And the Civil War was still being fought, it was still raging. And on July, it was released in January, like so Frederick Douglass had a monthly publication, I guess. But this speech was originally given on July 5th, probably of 1861. And so here we have the Civil War waging, and so they're like, hey, let's get him to come do a speech. And so the title of the speech was, What Shall Be Done with Slaves If Emancipated? Okay. And so I'm going to read selections from it. And if you've never read Frederick Douglass, he is he speaks, I imagine he spoke really well, and his writing is just as eloquent. So here it is. What shall be done with the 4 million slaves if they are emancipated? This question has been answered and can be answered in many ways. Primarily, it is a question less for man than for God, less for human intellect than for the laws of nature to solve. It assumes that nature has erred, that the law of liberty is a mistake, that freedom, though a natural want of the human soul, can only be enjoyed at the expense of human welfare, and that men are better off in slavery than they would or could be in freedom, that slavery is the natural order of human relations, and that liberty is an experiment. What shall be done with them? Our answer is, do nothing with them. Mind your business, and let them mind theirs. Your doing with them is their greatest misfortune. They have been undone by your doings, and all they ask now, and really have need of at your hands, is just to let them alone. They suffer by every interference, and succeed best by being let alone. As colored men, we only ask to be allowed to do with ourselves, subject only to the same great laws for the welfare of human society, which apply to other men, Jews, Gentiles, barbarians, Scythian. Let us stand upon our own legs, work with our own hands, and eat bread in the sweat of our own brows. When you, our white fellow countrymen, have attempted to do anything for us, it has generally been to deprive us of some right power, or privilege which you yourself would die before you would submit to have taken from you. In the name of reason and religion, we earnestly plead for justice before all else. Benevolence with justice is harmonious and beautiful, but benevolence without justice is a mockery. The sum of black man's misfortunes and calamities are just here. He is everywhere treated as an exception to all the general rules which should operate in the relations of other men. What shall be done with the Negro if emancipated? Deal justly with him. He is a human being capable of judging between good and evil, right and wrong, liberty and slavery, and is as much a subject of law as any other man. Therefore, deal justly with him. He is, like other men, sensible of the motives of reward and punishment. Give him wages for his work, and let hunger pinch him if he don't work. He knows the difference between fullness and famine, plenty and scarcity. Those are just a bunch of the excerpts, but basically, he's saying when people try to help the African American, Negro, however you want to call them, blacks, former slaves, is you ruin them, right? And we've talked about this before. This is basically creating a moral hazard. You by helping them in the way that they did in the past, right? Helping them by providing them money, providing them shelter, free of charge creates a moral hazard. It incentivizes less than good choices, right? They're not as worried about the choices that they make, and so they're less careful. And because of that, they start to make bad choices. And plus, on top of everything, they don't know what it's like to have responsibility. Now, this phenomena is not exclusive to African Americans. It is for everybody. And just as Frederick Douglass said, is because we're all human beings, we all respond to the same signals, incentives. And so therefore, everyone has to learn how to be individual, have responsibility, right? And he says, and the one thing that he begs for basically is justice. And that's a very frequent theme, idea that I always raise, especially when I preach, right? It's not about what you think people need, what you deem to be moral, but rather it's something that they actually need. Right. And so justice, I had to answer that phone. It was my 92-year-old mom. And so I'm going to have to do some troubleshooting for her right after I record this. But anyway, she lives a couple miles down the road. And so basically, Frederick Douglass wants people to deal with African Americans and everybody with justice. In other words, people have to be judged by their character, not by their generalization or the color of their skin or their racialization, as I always say. And if there is justice in society, even if you are going to judge people wrongly, uh, by some arbitrary racialization, eventually everything shakes out because it's too expensive to continue to do things prioritizing bad characteristics. It's just too expensive. And I did that example with my middle schoolers the other day. Again, I said, hey, let's just pretend I'm a sexist and I only hire men and my competition doesn't care, and so we'll pretty much hire women because they're cheaper, right? And so men generally demand to be paid more, and so I have to pay my workers $10 an hour, let's just say, for simplicity's sake, but my competitor gets to pay his workers $5 an hour, right? But our budget for labor is $100. And so I can only hire 10 workers, whereas my competitor can hire 20 workers. And because it's not, because the advent of machines, women can do the work just as well as men. And so therefore, eventually what will happen is my business will go bankrupt because I just cannot compete with my competitor. And so who's out of a job? All the men are out of the job, and women still have their job. And because now their competition is gone, they can receive a raise as a result. Okay. And so everyone has to pay for their choices, and some choices are much more expensive, costly than others. And so it's really interesting then when we talk about the celebration of various ethnicities, whether it's African American Heritage Month, Asian Heritage Month, what are we really celebrating? Are we really celebrating skin color, right? And if you say yeah, well, then are you really trying to make the argument that our talent, our ability, our mental ability is tied to our skin color, right? So depending on your skin color, this is what your abilities are, right? Uh, if you are going to make that argument, then you are actually arguing for the things that the opponents of Frederick Douglass was saying, right? That's what you're doing. You're on their side. You oppose Frederick Douglass because Frederick Douglass is saying, no, 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 don't judge me by my skin. My abilities and everything that I can do and think is not tied to the color of my, excuse me, color of my skin. And so it's this strange dance that we do where we affirm an ethnicity, but then perpetuate this wrong think that our abilities are tied to the color of our skin. No, it has nothing to do with that. Some of us are blessed with being great at math. Some of us are blessed with speaking and writing, as Frederick Douglass did in the past. Some of us are innovative. Some of us are creative artistically in music and painting, whatever. All of us are different. And so all of us must be judged not according to our skin color, unless that's what turns you on, right? And so I wrote an article, we're all racist now, and some people are attracted to skin color, right? And interestingly, the people who are attracted by that characteristic, skin color, aka skin color, right? They claim that they don't see skin color. That's what's so funny about the whole dynamic, right? Because you feel guilty that you're actually attracted to someone because of their skin color, that you have to say, no, it has nothing to do with their skin color when it has everything to do with skin color. I think you understand what I mean. Excuse me. So each of us have preferences, and as long as each of us pay for those preferences, we can live in peace. And the best choices as a society will always rise to the top. Those are the choices that will be perpetuated throughout society. That's it for today. Hope you have a great weekend. Talk to you next time.